Everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my April reading wrap-up for 2025. I feel like April was a fairly decent month for me in terms of all the months that I've had so far in 2025. I read 13 books. Most of them were short ones that I read in like one or two sittings. The only one that was like super long was I read like one for a book club, which you'll find out more information about that. I had another 5-star read, which is great because it's my second 5-star read of the year. I have not been having good luck with liking books this year, which has been very disappointing, but I'm very glad I managed to find another 5-star read this month. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this. So I read 13 books, as I said, and we are going to cover all of them. We're going to try and cover them briefly because there was a lot of books that I read this month, and I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long. So first, I read a short story slash novella. It's called Take Flight. It's by MJ Waverly. I got this one on BookFunnel. So the plot for this one sounded so good, and then I read it. But here's what the plot is. There's basically this girl named Thea, this woman, and she is heading to a new job at the Renaissance Fair, and on their way she meets a shapeshifter, and it's a fantasy romance. It is a short story slash novella, so it's only 27 pages long according to Goodreads, and so it flies by really quickly. Now, I have always liked the idea, and I've always toyed around with potentially writing a story like this someday, where it's a Renaissance fair or a Comic-Con, and the characters sort of have like a blending of like, oh, they're in this nerdy realm already, and then the fantasy elements become real. I've always liked that idea, and I've always toyed around with like potentially writing something like that. I don't know if anyone would be interested in reading that. It's something I would be interested in reading. I've also toyed around with the idea of like doing something similar, but instead of like fantasy elements, like fun, doing like a zombie type thing, which I think would be cool, but I don't know. So loved the idea and wanted to love the book. Didn't work out for me. So it was really bland. It didn't have very many interesting characters. It had a very lackluster writing style, and there was no like satisfying romantic scenes. Like all of them felt like so rushed. And it seemed like too, the book was either like rushed when it was being written, or legitimately the version that I got off of BookFunnel was missing scenes, because like it would start a scene and then would jump to something else, and I'd be like, what happened in the scene? How did we get from point A to point B? So I think it needed to either be edited better, or maybe I just had a version that was really glitchy and incomplete. Also, I felt like they didn't do a good job of clarifying whether the fantasy elements were real or like imagined. So I wish that was a little more concrete. I ended up giving this book 1 star. I think I'm always going to remember it because the idea is something that I toyed around with a while writing something similar myself, but at the same time I feel like it had mostly unmemorable scenes and characters, and everything about it was pretty much unmemorable besides the concept of the plot. And then I read a manga, so I read volume 1 of Fairy Tail. This is by Hiro Mishima, and I'm not sure what exactly makes this one exclusive. Like, I got it at Five Below, but I want to know why this one is considered an exclusive. Couldn't really figure out why. Maybe it's like it has some stuff at the end? No, that's more just giving context about the translations. Previous character designs, maybe? Although it was mainly just Natsu? Who knows what makes this a Five Below exclusive. Anyways, so if you don't know anything about Fairy Tail, which I'm sure most of you have at least heard about Fairy Tail, it basically follows this girl Lucy right here, and Lucy wants to join the Fairy Tail Guild, and it's her journey of joining the guild and meeting different people in the guild, the fantasy guild. The back here reads, cute girl wizard Lucy wants to join the Fairy Tail, a club for the most powerful wizards, but instead her ambitions land her in the clutches of a gang of unsavory pirates led by a devious magician. Her only hope is Natsu, a strange boy she happens to meet on her travels. Natsu's not your typical hero. He has motion sickness, eats like a pig, and his best friend is a talking cat. With friends like this, is Lucy better off with her enemies? So that's sort of like the way that the series starts, but it progresses a ton from there. I have seen, I think, the first 2 seasons of the anime. I never finished the anime, and when I pick up like a series that I read in like the 2010s, half the time I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing, and half the time I'm like, why did I really like fall head over heels in love with this series? And this is one that I'm like, why did I fall head over heels in love with the series? Not that it's bad, I think it's a good series, I don't have that same level of obsession anymore, I guess. So a fun fact about me was actually the first cosplay that I ever planned that I never did was Lucy from Fairy Tail. I had like a middle school group of friends. We were all planning on doing like a Fairy Tail group cosplay. Of course, as all middle school friendships do, our group fell apart, but like it was my first ever cosplay. Most recently, though, I've considered doing Gray and Juvia with a friend, though, not Lucy anymore. I think it still has really great world building. I still think there's some interesting characters. I think that Loki is actually my favorite character reading the manga now as an adult, but I was definitely really in love with Lucy when I was younger, and I don't fully understand the appeal of why I liked Lucy. Like, I don't remember if like she changes in the anime or something, but in this manga I'm like, I find her really annoying. But I really like Loki, I really like Natsu and Gray. I will most likely be continuing on with this series. If I don't continue on with the manga series, I will be finishing the anime at some point. But basically I have this thing with my brain, I don't know if it's my OCD or what, but my brain tells me that I have to finish every single TV series that I ever start. And so since I started the fairy tale anime, I have to finish it at some point. So I don't know if I will read more of the manga next or if I'll watch the anime next. Who knows? But I found this one like cute and enjoyable and nostalgic. I just don't think it was as great as I remembered it being from when I was in middle school, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read this novella slash short story, another one that I had on BookFunnel, called The Beast Inside of Him. It's by Ella Hart. Okay, so here is the plot line of it. So it's basically about this guy, and basically a woman want to sleep with him. But this guy wants like a more meaningful relationship. He doesn't really want just hookups and stuff. He isn't a fan of like hookup culture. He wants like a meaningful long-term relationship, like find the one for him type situation. And he is acquiring a new business, and he goes into town to do some work with the business that he acquires, and he starts to develop some feelings for this woman. So the guy is obviously a tiger shifter, as you can probably guess from the cover, so there is fantasy elements in here, but I feel like it's much more centered on the romance side of things. So the only part of the short story I liked was Tegan. I thought she was a really great, strong, and independent main female character. I didn't like that there was a plot line of here of sleeping with a woman just to have a baby, like, you know. And I also found that the writing style of the story didn't work well for me. I also like wanted more out of the story. Like I wanted, I don't know, it just felt like it was the start of a series, but it isn't really the start of a series because there's so much unresolved stuff in the short story. So I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. It's getting 2 stars instead of 1 star because of Tegan. Then I read Attack on Titan Junior High. This is the first omnibus. It contains volume 1 and volume 2. So basically, in case you don't know, some series have like a school AU if it's like a fantasy or sci-fi series, and this is Attack on Titan's school AU. So it is this like junior high school, and it's like following the kiddos at the school and stuff. So initially I wasn't sure how I felt about this because I was really frustrated that the trauma of the main character was reduced to like a joke. And I was like, the main series is propelled forward by the trauma of the main character, and that's a huge plot point. But I also understand wanting this series to be lighthearted because generally when there is a school AU, it is generally a lot more lighthearted and funny. So like I understand it, but I also feel like that was such a big plot point for the main character that I feel like it's not the greatest to reduce it down to just a simple little joke. Now, one thing that I found unique about this one in particular compared to the other school AUs that I've read, I've only really read one other school AU, I don't know why I said it as if I read multiple, is I really liked how the progression of the scenes in here followed generally the rough progression of the main series. I thought that was done really well. But my absolute favorite thing about this, well, there's 2 things. First of all, in the second volume, it really starts embracing Hanji's gender more. Hanji's not a woman, and if you think that, you need to do a little more research on the series and what the author has said explicitly about Hanji. Volume 2 really embraces his gender more. Hanji uses he and she pronouns in equal measures, in case you don't know, so I would say generally that Hanji is in the realm of like gender diverse. It hasn't been officially clarified whether Hanji's like non-binary or bi-gender or anything, but just keep that in mind. Hanji's not a woman. Stop calling Hanji a woman, people. Just get over your obsession with thinking that Hanji's a woman. Now, my favorite thing about this though is that like, I think the English translator was just like having fun, just messing around. Like, there's just so many out-of-pocket things in here. Oh god, I wish that I could read off the sentence to you about Fox News that was said in here. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Oh. Okay, I found it. This is my favorite line, so a little bit of a spoiler here, just skip ahead if you want to avoid this, it'll be quick. They want to make sure we humans never try to stand up to the Titans. They want us to think Titans work so hard there's no point in us even trying to compete, like Fox News does with immigrants. Like, I think the English translator was just having fun, but they're so out of pocket and I love it. Like, having the main character say that, iconic. There's so many other things in here that just like are just fun and messing around, I think, with the translations and making more like references that like a Western audience would understand, which I think is fantastic. So I ended up giving the first volume 3 stars, and then I gave the second volume 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars instead of 3 because I really liked embracing Hanji's gender more. And so it averages out to 3.5 stars overall for this omnibus. I do recommend this one if you like Attack on Titan, and especially if you want to see the out-of-pocket, unhinged things that the English translator wrote in here. It's fantastic. It's my favorite school AU series out of the 2 that I've read so far. Then I read Death Note Volume 9. So I'm sort of really bored of the Death Note series now. Like, it started out being really interesting, being like a moral dilemma of like using the Death Note and also like an intense mystery. And now Volume 9 did have a lot more action, was a lot more intense than like the previous several volumes in this series. However, I'm still a little bored of it. I really like Nier as a character. I just don't really care for the series anymore. So I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It wasn't great. I'm really bored of the series, but I made it so far that I'm like, I need to finish it. But then I got my 5-star read, and this was Peace Locomotion by Jacqueline Woodson. So Peace Locomotion essentially is a follow-up to the first book, Locomotion, and it follows this kid named Locomotion, and his parents have died, and he is in a foster family, and so it deals a lot with like themes of like adoption, and he's been separated from his siblings. It also has to do with siblings being separated in the adoption system. It deals with so many important topics, but it's like a kid book. Like, it's for kids, but it deals with such intense topics in such a very sensitive way, and in such a way that kids will be able to understand it, relate to it, and take a lot out of the story. This story in particular is a lot about Locomotion writing down memories and recording memories for his sister, who is with a different adoptive family. And I thought that was really beautiful because you really see his love for his sister, and you really see a strong sibling relationship that can really push through and stay standing despite the struggles that they are going through, which I think is wonderful. I love Jacqueline Woodson's books, and this is easily one of my favorite ones that she's written. I highly recommend checking out Jacqueline Woodson's books. I have read Brown Girl Dreaming, Locomotion, Peace Locomotion, and If You Come Softly so far, and I'd recommend all of them. They are all great stories with really heavy yet impactful and meaningful topics in the stories. Oh no, I got the notification that my phone ran out of storage, so let's film uber quickly because I just deleted a few apps and I need to get this done today. So then I read Witch Hat Atelier. I'm not really sure how to say it. I read the first volume of this manga. It's about this girl and she wants to be a witch, but witches are born that way. They're not made that way. And she almost gives up on her dream when she meets this witch named Kifri. So I thought that this was a really cute story. It's nothing like life-changing. It's just super cute. I love a lot of the characters. I really love Agate and I like Kifri. They are my favorites out of the series so far. I thought it was really sweet. My friend wants me to cosplay from this someday, so I may cosplay from this someday, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. So then I read The Chunker. I read House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. It is a literal brick. So this is a fantasy series with like fae and angels and tons of different fantasy elements. The series originally starts off by following this girl Bryce, and her best friend is murdered and they think they catch the killer, and then 2 years later more killings start popping up that are very similar to what happened to Bryce's best friend, and they realize that they haven't actually caught the killer, and Bryce gets wrapped up in this. So this is an adult romantasy series. It is high fantasy, so it is a bit intense to like start getting into it because there's so much information thrown at you. However, push through that because it is really good. I absolutely loved the first 75% of this book. I thought it would be like a 5-star read. I loved the plotline. I thought it was really fast and interesting, and I love the new territories they explored in this world, and I really love the characters. I feel like Ethan is becoming more of a favorite character for me as this series is going on. However, the last 25% of the book was a little disappointing to me, and it went downhill for me. So basically the main plotline is resolved and then it just turns into a bunch of smut. And I was like, I don't mind smut in books, but I want more of a plot in there. Like, if it was spread throughout the book and not just shoved at the end, I would have not minded the smut. The other thing was, like, there is a big event in here that happens that I don't want to spoil, but I feel like most people know what it is. And I don't like that event because, to say the least, I don't like this author's most popular series. Being very vague about this because I don't want to spoil it for people who somehow have not seen the spoilers for this series. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was like the 75% would be like 5 stars and then it just goes downhill, you know? So I still think it was a pretty good book. I will be continuing with the series. I read this one with my book club. If you want to join the book club, the link will be down in the description below. I have mixed feelings about whether I think that this one or the first book is better. I think they're both pretty solid books though, and I do enjoy them both despite the flaws I have found in both of them. Then I read Death Note Volume 10. I keep forgetting that Death Note has little like names after it says the volume, so this one was called Deletion. I think the one before that I read, Volume 9, was called like Disappearance or something. I didn't like this one. I'm so over the series. It's dragged on far too long. It keeps running over the same plot lines over and over and over again, so it's like really repetitive. But I have 2 volumes left, so I'm gonna push through to the end and finish this series and just get it over with. Nier is the only thing I like about this series anymore. I'm so sorry. He is the only positive part of the series for me. And I read what may be the oldest book on my shelf, which was Hercules and Other Tales from Greek Mess. This is by Olivia E. Coolidge. My dad actually lent this to me when I was 10 years old, and I only read it this year. I'm 24. So that says a lot about how long this book has been on my shelf. So basically this one just has a bunch of different Greek myths in here. Overall, it was 3.25 stars once I averaged all of them out. So obviously Hercules is the longest myth in here, but there's other myths in here as well. I don't think that they're anything like life-changing the way that they're written by Olivia E. Coolidge. However, I still found that they were fun and they were good refreshers, and there was also some in here that like I had never read before. There was like a couple new ones to me that I thought was interesting to get some new myths in there. So Hercules, I gave 4 stars. It was a very simple retelling of the story, but it was a good refresher of the story. The Fateful Contest, I gave 2 stars. It's Arachne's story. I'm not a huge fan of her story, and I didn't think that the way that things were written in that story were like redeemable or interesting at all to me. Then The Mysterious Strangers, I gave 4 stars. This was one that like I hadn't heard of before. It sort of reminds me of a lot of stories that like I grew up with, because like I grew up in like a Christian household and I went to church and stuff. So it sort of reminds me of that a little bit, where like humans are showing humility, gods are treating humans well when the humans deserve it. I love that type of things. Then I read The Beloved Statue, which I gave 3 stars. I feel like it had a lot of potential, but it wasn't written in a super like fascinating way in my opinion in here, and I feel like there was more to be desired from it. However, I think it would be one that would be really good for like a retelling or like a romance retelling book if there isn't one of that already. Then the next one was How the Seasons Came to Be. I love the story of Hades and Persephone, so I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read The Boy Who Flew Too High, which is 3 stars for me. I feel like the bland writing style really hindered from my enjoyment of this one, because The Boy Who Flew Too High, that story generally has a very strong emotional impact, and it's supposed to have a very strong emotional impact, but it just lacked that because of the writing style. And then The Winning of Atlanta. So this one, I've heard this story before. I generally like it. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I've always wanted to read more though, like what happens after the marriage and how the marriage goes, because I think that part would be really interesting to me, but it is a pretty sweet and cool story. And then the final one in here, The Adventures of Theseus. So this was the most complete version of this myth that I have ever read. There was so much before the labyrinth in here instead of just focusing on the labyrinth, which I thought was really interesting. I felt like the ending of The Adventures of Theseus was really rushed though. So those are my brief thoughts on all the myths that were in there and how they were written by Olivia E. Coolidge. There's definitely better Greek mythology books out there, but I found this one was fairly enjoyable. And now I can finally give it back to my dad after like 14 years of having it on my shelf. And then I read The Seventh Queen, which is by Rose Sinclair. So this is a sapphic Alice in Wonderland story, and okay, I really love this couple together. I thought that they were really sweet, and I just really liked them together as a couple, and I wanted more because this is a short story slash novella, and I wanted like a full-length novel out of it. I think that Rose Sinclair is really good at writing romance. I think she has a good writing style, so I'm going to be continuing this series just to like see what a full-length novel is like, because the rest of the series is full-length novels. Surprisingly, they aren't sapphic though. I was like, why is the only sapphic couple in this series a short novella? The only thing I found a little frustrating was that like we don't get more of this couple. I get a little frustrated sometimes when I read like prequel novellas and I find a couple that I really like, and then we don't have more of the couple like having their own long lengthy novel. But I still think that this one was pretty enjoyable. Definitely have your expectations in mind. It's not a full-length novel. It isn't going to be the most like beautifully developed romance that you've ever read because it's so short. However, I did really enjoy it, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And then I got a book and then I read it the next day after. Can you believe me? That's shocking, because normally books sit on my shelves for like ages and ages. Hence all the books back there that I have not read. This one is a manga. I technically consider it a graphic novel even though it's by Tokyo Pop, so sort of a manga. It's called Evie's Wicked Runway, and this is the first book in the series. It's by Jason Mule. I don't know if I said Jason's last name correctly. So this is a story set in the Descendants universe following Evie, and she is entering a fashion contest. So I thought that it was a cute side story in the Descendants series, and I think there's some really great themes in here for kids because this is like a kids graphic novel. However, I feel like this could be just generally like any generic like fashion contest for kids written in a graphic novel format, because like it lacked a lot of the Disney elements that really makes the Descendants series shine and really makes the Descendants series like a part of Disney canon. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. I think that if it has more Disney elements to it in the next book in the series, I think it will easily be one that's like a higher rating for me and one that I really enjoy. I did enjoy this one, it's just nothing special because it lacked strong Disney elements. And then I read a short story called Utero. This is by Kevin Allen. Utero is a sci-fi futuristic war novel and it follows a cyborg. So I was hoping that I would enjoy it. However, I feel like it was packed with too much military knowledge to the extent that I don't think you would like this book unless you like strong sci-fi and military elements in your stories. I found that the main character was extremely dull to the point that he really hindered from the story and made it not as good, and it's very clearly written by a man, and I say that in a derogatory way. It just screams like trying to be as masculine as possible and lacking strong female characters to the extent that the only female character in here is already dead by the time the book starts, and she's just used for a tragic backstory to the main character. So I ended up giving this book 1 out of 5 stars. So those were all the books that I read this month, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. All of my other social media will be linked down in that little description below. I hope all of you had a great April, and I will see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.